And that's exactly what we are going to talk about right now. Now we pleased to come to the stage all the panelists of the Shake Your Money Maker session. Stuart Lawson, Senior Advisor to UI, and our speakers, Brian Dixon, Capital Innovators, Natalia Kaspersky, InfoWatch. Don't forget to put your hands together. At least that will keep you warm if you feel cold. Sergey Malyshev, Pромsвязьбанк. Sergey Solonin, Kiwi, as well as head of the Fintech Association, Stefan Heilmann, Investment Banking Group, IEG. Please welcome our speakers and our moderator.
Good afternoon, everybody. Lovely to see you. Perfect day. Great hamburger at lunch. What could go wrong? We have a great panel for you today. I've been involved since '95 in the banking industry in Russia. I set up Citibank in '95, having spent about 20 years with that bank. And I've spent the last 25 years with a selection of other banks, and currently I'm with EY, and I'm a professor in St. Petersburg and in Moscow. Now, we've got a great panel, and what I thought I'd do is, if it's okay by you, I'll just make a couple of opening comments to set the scene very shortly, and then get straight into the panel. It is an extraordinary time for the banking industry in Russia. It's developed from very basic roots. When I guess in '95, we were looking to hire bankers, but there were no bankers in Russia because there was only a Soviet-style bank. And so we needed to hire young, smart people and then have them learn the technologies. But that's changed now, and there's been a leapfrogging in technologies. And many of the dynamics that drove the traditional banking models are shifting as technology fundamentally alters the interaction with employees, clients, regulators, and counterparties. As the industry has consolidated, there are some core questions. Can the large banks stay nimble enough, and are they able to accommodate the very different cultures of the highly flexible, non-hierarchical young fintechs? From a platform perspective, is it better to attach new entities to existing structures or to fully integrate them inside the current environment? And if you do that, what danger do you run that they lose their innovation and their adaptability? And obviously, how to redefine the customer experience. By the way, please note my high-tech speaking notes. How do you accommodate the new customer experience given innovation? Data and how it is accessed will lie at the center of these new developments. And alongside the opportunities, significant issues emerge. On the one hand, the new revolution has no borders, and to remain competitive requires the players to be able to access best-in-class technologies irrespective of origin. But on the other hand, data security and technological sovereignty becomes a priority for governments and market participants. It's a tricky balancing act. As the gap opens up between the market-dominant banks and the rest, how do the smaller independent banks compete against the technology being deployed by the giants who have access to vast R&D pools? So, the game is on, as Sherlock would say, and the coming period will provide massive new opportunities to engage with bank clients, both from within the existing financial products and across other segments. Lines are blurring between telecom providers and financial institutions, and between the latter and marketplace portals. Enabled by a plethora of new technologies, winners will redefine the business models and will redefine the industry. So, we're facing, the one thing we know is we're facing change. And Fintech sits at the heart of that change. It's where the traditional model meets the future. And actually, is there any relevance now to the traditional model of banks? Well, we have with us Sergey Salinin, CEO and founder of Kiwi and the CEO of the Fintech Association. So I think you couldn't find someone better to answer that question than Sergey. Sergey, would you like to comment?
So say it again. Sorry about the question. What was the question?
The question is there any relevance for traditional banks, or are fintechs going to redefine business models to such an extent that traditional banking models are no longer relevant? How revolutionary is fintech?
Well, I believe that we are in the phase, or migrating to the phase, where financial services are no longer attached or completely belong to the banks. So banks in general, I think it's an old story. So we don't want banks, we want service as customers. So we want to make a money transfer, or we want to buy goods, or we want to get a loan to buy these goods. So it's all about services finally, and about things that we really want. So banking in general is going in the backyard. So, and I don't think that, because always the question is always who wins, like fintechs or banks, and I don't think that's a relevant question at all. So the winning part will be the consumer, who want to do very simple and easy to make, easy to have services at the point where he's standing, or at the point of his attention. So all the fintech industry, together with banks, are going to be a little bit in the backyard, and it doesn't matter who will provide a specific service finally. So the Russian environment is very specific because it's very concentrated. So it's very difficult for fintechs to be in that space separately from banks, and large banks especially, because large banks like Sberbank has maybe 50% of all customer relationships. And if you are excluding Sberbank from your fintech perspectives, it means that you immediately lose like half of your potential clients. So it is a challenge for us and for Fintech Association to make new systems and new approaches in standardization or access to these large banks' infrastructures in order to have this fintech at all in our environment. Because yes, I agree that we were developing very fast because we were competing a lot. But now it's the next, how to say, phase where very large banks like VTB, Sberbank, and others started to acquire. They also understand that they're going to be in the backyard, so they started to make deals with content. So with something that is real need or real service for the person, and then I think they're going to play with that. So they shift their attention. So they're not anymore. So in their vision, as I understand their actions, they're not anymore banks at all. So they're more like services with banking services, so something product with banking support. So I think that we are moving. We have this shift towards that area, and we can't say is it a bank. So it doesn't matter actually how it is named. Is it a bank or is it fintech or whatever? So it's a service on the point that is needed by the customer, and very simple and very quick. So that's my idea.
Yeah, I mean, I guess a couple of comments out of that. It's very interesting the way it almost it sounded like you were saying one of your roles in the Fintech Association is to protect the fintechs, because if you didn't, then they'd all be sitting inside Sberbank, because they'll have been gobbled up by this great monster. But the monster exists. So is one of the ways out of it the open banking platform?
One of the so if you look at the fintech association efforts and subjects that we are going into, you will see that we are supporting blockchain, and we're trying to use these kind of environments and legalize it in Russia in terms of technology. Then we're working with open APIs, so we are trying to build a standard. So if you're a startup, you have a standard to connect into the banking system, and it doesn't matter if it's Sberbank or so, all the banks will be in this ecosystem. Then we are trying to deregulate payments, because we want to have standards on payments. So the future is very inexpensive for zero-cost payments that should be throughout the banking system. So it shouldn't be just Sberbank to Sberbank payments, because it's a road with the end, right? And it will never be that affordable or that open if it will be only one bank, so all the banks going. And also we're working on the solution to provide startups access to that platforms in terms of the money movement or something. And we're trying to do standards on open APIs to the banks. So free movement of identities, not personal information, but ability to with one click to on my request as a customer to move your identification information to other bank. So it's again opening the system. So yes, the main subject for us in FinTech Association is competition. So increasing competition within that environment that we have. The second one maybe is trying and testing new technologies. So like blockchains and like some issues with artificial intelligence systems, etc. And third one is standards, so that we don't face the situation that on the merchant side you will have, I don't know, 100 QR codes that every bank implemented on this point of sale. So we want that to be open. We want that environment to be competitive, and I think that is a solution for future fintech to grow in Russia.
Okay, I mean, I won't keep you under the spotlight much more. Just very last question. If we, it's sensitive. 72% of banking assets in Russia are controlled by the state. Do you think the state can be a source of innovation? That state banks can be a source of innovation? How do you keep innovation alive in a state-controlled environment? I mean,
you cannot force innovations. I mean, innovations happen. It's not like you can make it. So I'm not a big believer in governmental managed innovations. So I think that the governmental effort should be to provide the environment, an atmosphere, not only laws and easy doing business solutions, but also right atmosphere, so that creative people can do their job, so that they can create something. And you never know where innovation happens. So you can make this soil, but then something can be created or grown on this soil. So you cannot force it. And I think when you force it, you never succeed, actually. So it's not about the management, like bad management of governmental companies or another motivations or another. It's not about that. It's how it is usually created. It's not in the scope. Innovations are out of the scope, and government or government managed companies cannot do that by their nature. I'm not speaking that they're bad or good. We're not evaluating right now, but I think that it is almost impossible to push innovations. That's my personal view. It's not. I'm not talking as FinTech head of FinTech Association right now. It's my personal.
Okay, that's great. Thank you. Let's switch gears. Natalia Kaspersky, you're a famous player. You have been involved in the creation of one business and then in a second business, and actually now a third business. When you look out over these developments in technology, the data as data becomes just the center of everything. Are we ready to protect that data? I mean, obviously, your business model is that your services are needed, but as the Internet of Things takes over, this is rather broader than FinTech. I mean, it's a more general question. As the world becomes ever more interconnected, how worried are you about the cyber threats that might appear, broader than just FinTech?
Thank you very much, Stuart. If you don't mind, I will be speaking Russian.
Sure.
Вообще говоря,
If I may, I would like to comment on the previous question just a little bit, because I really would like to talk about innovations. Innovations, they grow like grass. And I do not agree with that. I think that the authorities can stimulate innovations, and Skolkovo is a perfect example of how the state can stimulate innovations. The authorities create certain framework, and within that framework, innovations are born. Skolkovo has been built on state funds, on state budget allocations. We can't say that allocations grow on their own all the time. No. As for data, the question you asked me, we've been in this cybersecurity business for years, and data protection is a huge problem, especially so when it comes to platforms which collect data from users. This area is not regulated. Yes, it is true that the authorities are working on a number of laws to regulate this area. The so-called Big Data Protection Program is one of them.
Here in Skolkovo, because Skolkovo is responsible for a regulatory part of the digital economy in the Russian Federation. And we are saying that so far this issue has not been resolved, and as long as it is not resolved, all the data which is being collected from the user by different platforms are subject to the risk, because platform has their own commercial interest, and the platform is trying to use this data as much as possible to cram anything they can cram into for their users, and then to sell this data somewhere else. I believe that this is a high risk, and primarily there should be regulatory barriers, as it is being done elsewhere in the world today, because now in all countries, be it Europe, and Europe has very tough legislation which has been passed about the data storage. And there is a GDPR law about the personal data protection, more expanded data, and many companies do not know what to do in this situation, because it doesn't matter where you turn, you seem to be breaking this GDPR law. I don't think it should be as difficult as in Europe in terms of legislation. We have to choose a more well-balanced approach, so to speak. Otherwise, simply no startups in big data will ever exist in Russia. But still, regulatory component is very important. That's number one. Number two, when we speak about the technological data protection, technological protection becomes increasingly complex, because the data are being processed within a platform. And it doesn't matter how you protect the data, any platform simply by definition has an access to this data. Meaning that any external protection becomes senseless. You have to make a deal with the platform. If it's a Russian-based platform like a Kiwi, possibly we can strike a deal with Kiwi. If it is a platform like, outside of Russia, it's more difficult, if not impossible at all. I mean, some Facebook, which is collecting more and more data. I think in a while there'll be even payment services, and Google is now doing its own payment services. And speaking about the Google, we haven't been able to reach an agreement yet, which presents a risk of an open platform, and we don't quite know what to do with it. I think fintech should be within a country, because any financial information is very sensitive and it has to stay within a country. It should be like some kind of regulatory requirement. And on top of that, there should be a right for using this citizen-generated data and the company's data. It's more difficult with companies because, on one hand, they are more subject to regulation. On the other hand, to build a company in Russia, it is not difficult. There are a huge number of them. There are a lot of ways of how you can use a legal entity which you've created. And I think here we can use fintech and different scoring models which can be built with the use of big data, with the use of analytical methodology, heuristic analytic. For example, we have one subsidiary with us which is involved in building this kind of scoring models, and we do the financial data analysis, and on top of that we do the work about the counterparties of this organization, and maybe like a one-off evaluation of their personnel. And then with some frequency, the machine is analyzing all the subsequent actions of this legal entity or a company. The point being that Russian regulatory environment is becoming tougher and tougher about companies, and I think it's wrong. And this type of scoring, the flexible scoring, could be an asset for the Russian government and for the Central Bank of Russia alike, not to make too much pressure on companies sometimes because their bank accounts are being freezed and all kind of negative things. If this kind of scoring machine would be employed on the level of the Russian government, this would enable us to avoid some very tough procedures like blocking your accounts and things like that. And here you go. This is how the fintech could be used. It's a very good and positive result. Natalia, we do such a project, QYC. It's done joint with the Central Bank of Russia. We're doing this project, and I think this topic of blocking, freezing accounts, we little by little are going to solve it. Well, that would be wonderful. That would be just great. And yes, we have some agenda. We have some actions in this field. Yeah.
Listening to you, I mean, what you say, of course, is completely right, which is data itself needs to be protected, and therefore, technological sovereignty. But would you agree that innovation requires total openness? In other words, if you can't create barriers between countries if you want to create best-in-class products. I mean, if you're going to compete, you have to be able to compete globally in the current world.
Да нет, конечно. Послушайте.
No, of course not. Of course not. Soviet Union has been competing very good, and Soviet Union won over the US. Had it not been that the US destroyed Soviet Union from inside. And this illusion that we have to build a full, openness, it's only profitable to big companies, or I'm sorry, big states which have a lot of money. Then they drain all the brains, and the poor countries have nothing left. Openness is very bad for innovations, very bad, because all the innovations are being washed out of the country into the one who has a lot of money. Like the vacuum cleaner is working. Vacuum cleaner is sucking in the air, and if you have the point of sucking in, and big money would be the attraction point, sucking in point, then all innovations will come to you, will come to your country, will come to your company. And again, what it takes is to build barriers. Barriers have to be built. Otherwise, since we are not the generator of money, globally speaking, for the world, then we need to build barriers as a country.
I'm not going to get into my view of that. Let's ask Brian Dixon, Chief Operating Officer at Capital Innovators, to comment on how you feel, whether or not you feel innovation should be built behind barriers. I mean, you have a business in the US. You are cross-border. You're involved in cross-border M&A. Give us your opinion.
Sure. So I think at the very early stages, early stage businesses really need to operate without borders when they're first coming out with things, but that really depends on the industry in which that business is operating. So of course, if it's a business in the financial technology space and you're moving client funds from point A to point B, you have to operate within financial or regulatory environment. And so in that sense, specific types of products do need to have certain guide walls around them in order for them to be developed if they're ever going to be deployed at market at scale, because then you're going to have regulatory bodies watching you. There's other types of technology, I think, that can be developed that doesn't need to have regulatory bodies watching it. We're seeing a lot of this in the AI space. We're seeing a lot of this in the blockchain and crypto space. And if there is no regulations around it, it allows technology to move a lot faster. So if you think about companies like Binance, for example, that's probably the world's biggest and most successful cryptocurrency exchange. Their strategy was to actually move into developing regions where the government would loosen their regulations or rewrite their regulations in order for them to build a more successful and scalable business model. And because of that, they became a $1 billion company in 11 months. Like, that is an incredible fast growth of innovation because they worked with developing regions that allowed them to build innovation the way that they wanted to do that. Now, if that were to happen in the United States or some other territories, there's no way they would have had that level of growth because they would have had to deal with regulatory bodies. So I think it really depends on the approach of the startup, the type of technology that's being developed, and if it's a financial technology product, at the early stages, you can do it, but at some point, you're going to run into government and regulatory bodies, and you're going to have to work alongside them in the framework that they provide.
What would you, looking at the marketplace, what do you see as the technologies that are going to win out in this fintech race? And what do you see? Does blockchain work? Are the cryptocurrencies just another form of gambling? I mean, what's your perspective on that?
So I would disagree with the gambling statement. I was very fortunate. I got involved in cryptocurrency back in 2001 when there was only Bitcoin. And since then, we've seen tremendous innovation and evolution of that space. And I believe that that technology currently is being developed and will be the next layer of the internet on top of our internet architecture. And that businesses and all sorts of B2B and business to consumer products will be built on top of blockchain as an underlying architecture. In terms of cryptocurrency, I think that is growing incredibly fast as well. I do see a future where we have a series of different crypto-related tokens that allow us to transact much easier cross-border. And I think in terms of technology that's growing and scaling the quickest, in the blockchain sector, there are startup companies that have growth levels that surmount any other thing we've ever seen in any technological space, even beyond artificial intelligence, which is pretty surprising. In terms of what is going to ultimately win out, I think that larger technology players that integrate fintech solutions will be the future of banks. So think about right now, Facebook is creating a cryptocurrency called Global Coin. If Facebook tomorrow started lending traditional financial services like mortgages and different types of loans and their own payment mechanism, overnight they would be probably one of the biggest banks on the planet. And they have 1.5+ billion daily active users. And so when you see these large technology players like that begin to implement financial products, they already have a distribution layer that's second to none over any financial institution in the world. And I think that is the future of what banks will look like.
So you were actively nodding your head, so I guess that means you agree. How does that work if you have borders? I mean, that model that you talk about is a model without borders.
Well, Well, what I was telling you was exactly that. So there are banks, and this is like regulatory bodies. Then there are accesses, like APIs or accesses to these banks for some other products that could be exploited locally in the region or in the country. So I think that's where we have to at some point or at some day move. In terms of the privacy statement, I agree with Natalia. So I think that privacy is a very specific issue, and we should do something to regulate that. And I think it's not like our trend. It's not about building borders. Every country is thinking in that space. So privacy is a big question. In terms of the innovations and how your question was how you can do innovations locally. That's a question that worries me a lot, because I think that we live in the global world, and unfortunately we don't have in Russia enough capacity. I mean, customer capacity to do big games. So China or India, I think that's something that we can see very local products, and economically they can be successful. Russia, unfortunately, I think should think about integrating with some other world. I don't know if it will be China or India or whatever, Europe, whatever. But we should be part and equal partner in some of that settlements that can help us to produce right products. Otherwise, it is very unlikely, or it is likely that we'll get another Lada, the car that was in the Soviet Union. So I think that's a question where we still have talks with regulatory bodies and with others, but we should look at this more, specifically, or talk a little more about that.
Thank you. Well, Stefan Heilmann, CEO of Investment Banking Group, you've done $1 billion of deals this last year. You've done 5.5 billion over 20 years, apparently. Is Russia the partner? Are you interested?
That's well, thanks for asking and inviting. Before I answer the question whether Russia is an interesting market, I really need to go back to those 3 points. Barrier. Can the government do innovation, and do the startups needs to be protected? So on the barrier side, I don't agree with Natalie at all. Digital services are designed by DNA to be global. There are no barriers whatsoever. If you need barriers, you're not competitive. You're not competitive in your product, in your framework. Money goes somewhere where it's an interesting, compelling proposition. If you don't have that, you can't protect inefficiency.
Sorry, wave to the Prime Minister. I'm pretty sure he was waving back.
Too bad he's not here. So I believe it's an absolute no-go, and it's even not for me to decide, because I think innovation will go where it's attractive, no matter whether there's a barrier or not. So I think it's
good background scenery.
So that's my view on this, and I've seen it in so many different markets who try to protect. Once they open it up, the bloody, brutal truth comes in your face. Secondly, can a government drive innovation? I would say generally no, because it's not their assignment. Their assignment of any government, no matter what couleur, is to incentivize, to put a framework into one's country which allows innovation to flow freely at its best. And if that framework has been designed and incentivized, subsidized, there are a lot of words for this, I think the government has done a great job. What you have over here, I think it's outstanding, so it's important and well done. And last but not least, and I think, Sergey, you were saying that, do the startups need to be protected? Well, I see, in Fintech, I think Fintech is not a disruptive space. Fintech is a cooperative space between existing banks and startups. Why? Because I believe all the existing banks need to become startups. There are a lot of prime ministers here, right?
No, I don't think so. I think he just wants another look.
So I think big banks, even in Russia, we need to help them to become in a more startup mode. Just their legacy tech always requires that. And the startup needs to be helped to become companies. So that's a cooperative mindset. And then if you put on top of it an open banking standard, that enhances actually that cooperation, and it makes the most successful service thrive. Why? Because once you have an open banking standard, the consumer decides what's good or not. So far, banks, fintechs have decided what's good for the customer. It's an engineering approach. I know that I'm German. We're all engineering thinking. But that's basically what I think it's happening on the fintech space. Coming back to your question, did you say, do I like Russia? No, you didn't say that,
No, I
right?
said, were you interested in buying Russia? Are you going to make some M&A deals today, for instance?
So there's not a clear yes. I've looked at it in the first wave of internet, and I shied away both as a banker and an investor because of currency risks. So typical market risk, which I couldn't handle as a foreigner. I'm coming back now over the last 12 months and looking very closely at Russia because I believe it's massively changing. And I believe, besides all different views on politics or global politics, I think the market will stabilize. And that's for me a reason to be very much in favor of a country the size and the capability, particularly in the digital world as Russia, and with an improving framework.
Okay. Sergey Malyashev, CIO of Promsvers Bank, you're the banker on the panel. So up to you. Tell us about your views of fintech and whether or not you think this new wave means that you as a bank need to change your business plan to incorporate a new wave of fintechs.
Yep, thank you. I would pretty much stipulate on what Sergey has previously said, because I do not perceive myself as a bank made of bronze. Actually, the battle between fintech and startups and the banks, which everyone was talking about like 3 years ago, I think that discussion is not in place anymore, because the banks, at least here in Russia, have become the biggest startups, the biggest fintech companies, and it's just that's the new way of doing business, because the business we are in at the moment is about creating value to the end consumer, and also creating value to the other customer, to the shareholders, whatever they are, be that government or private individuals. That really doesn't matter much, because I would say the being state-owned bank doesn't give us too much privilege, because as you correctly said, more than 70% of the banks are state-owned banks. And what I really believe in is the cooperation between the banks and the startups and fintech companies. There's one more person on the floor which we haven't spoken much at the moment. One of the biggest innovators in this country is actually the state, the central bank. Just you see the number of helicopters flying over. That's a big bumps. That shows you the amount of interest to fintech from the state. And what central bank is doing at the moment, I don't know any other central bank creating a platform like that, like for example the Система быстрых платежей, the fast payment system, which allows you to transfer money, make the money transfer just by knowing the phone number. and that's it. No banking details, no nothing.
Yeah, that's also the product of Fintech Association.
Yeah, and we're a big part of that as well. Yeah, we were one of the first 4 banks introducing the system. By the way, there are 2 more were state-owned banks as well. So this does not say that we are from the Stone Age. There are some more means and platforms which the state is creating at the moment. For example, the biometrics. The biometric system, unified, common biometric system for all the banks. None of the banks, even Sberbank, can create such a system to cover 100% of the population. And now what Mr. Akimov is saying, for example, who is in charge of communication in this country, he's saying that the biometrics sooner or later will become the only ID for a person to get access to the state services. And don't forget that the biggest entity which the entity which has the biggest number of customers in this country is the state. It's 143 million customers for the state, and access to the state services is also it's a big perspective for fintechs, startups, and banks. And I can say that only doing that together, we have advantages and disadvantages, banks and startups and the state. Because, well, I don't really believe that any of the startups can easily integrate with система межведомственного документооборота or whatever. So
The unified documentation system set up by the state.
past all the compliance and legal barriers, you'll join the majority. Okay, that's a nightmare. Well, though we've gone through that road, it costs a lot of money, really. The biometrical system we implemented that just on our network of 300 something branches that costs us more than $1 million, and it's going to be more and more. So, but still, people need easy, quick access to the state services. And I have totally agree with Sergey. We've spoken with many customers, and we ask them, like, guys, what you want from the bank? What they say, we want. Well, the bank just please disappear. We don't want banks. Okay. No one is waking up 8 o'clock in the morning saying, "Hey, it's a great day today. I'm going to a bank." That's not the case. So we're about creating value. We either do that ourselves, but we are not that flexible. We don't have that flexibility and customer focus as the startups, and that's where we want really to participate with fintechs and startups in creating the value. And we believe really in open API platform where we can launch fast, test it, fail fast, redo, and create this ecosystem. So there's also what startups don't have the capital, obviously, and they don't. And also, you guys, what you need is the customer base. And we also have like 2.5 million active customers who are open to the and who demand the features which are provided by startups. Well, whoever provides it, if bank does that, okay. If startup does that, it's also okay. So let all the flowers bloom, and we're ready to support that.
Thank you. You know, I spent 35 years getting up and going to the bank, waiting for you to come and visit me. So listening to the fact that banks are no longer relevant is very hurtful. I mean, the fact is, actually, there's a serious point, which is, from the retail side, from the consumer side, I buy it absolutely. The moment you move into corporate decisions, underwriting, long-term credit decisions, strategy decisions, that isn't there yet. At least I hope it isn't there yet. So I think these sort of fintech conversations create services within the corporate sector, disintermediate retail, but and this is just because I'm a dinosaur, I'd hate to see large-scale underwriting decisions made by crowdfunding, because that seems like an opportunity for a crisis waiting to happen. But maybe that's just me as a dinosaur speaking. So I think we're running out of time, and I'm thinking of a question for each of you, if you don't mind. To make it the same question, it's a variant of one I did at the plenary. Given all your experience, and you all have plenty of it, if you had one piece of advice for a startup in the fintech space, what would it be? Let's start with you.
So my one piece of advice I would have is that when you're a financial technology startup company, you do not have the luxury of having a beta. Your very first product that comes out has to be as close to flawless as possible once you put it in a real world environment, because if you're moving real funds through that product, you can't screw that up. So you don't have when you're doing your alpha testing and your beta testing, that has to be in a closed and controlled environment. So just make sure when you're ready to push your initial product out into the market and you're starting to move real client funds around, that it is as close to flawless as you can get it. There's going to be iterations over time. There's going to be enhancements and improvements. But even to integrate with the banking or from a regulatory perspective, it has to be pristine from the beginning.
Very good advice. Sergey?
I would say just one big recommendation, just talk to your customers. Talk to your customers, and when you don't know the right answer, go and talk to your customers. That's how you'll obtain the data which help you grow. Just that.
Thank you.
Ну, я бы сказала, что
Well, I think that you need to think about protection. Yes, so I work in the field of cybersecurity. That is why I always look at things through the prism of cybersecurity. A lot of startups think about security only after they start their projects, and that is why it's either expensive or impossible, because the architecture of their product does not really allow any cybersecurity inbuilt in it. So when you are working on architecture on a system, you should think about security immediately. Money, personal data, transaction information, it's all very sensitive and should be protected, should be secure.
Well, I would say that now what we have shorter and shorter shifts in generational shifts, like Generation Z, Generation A now. So it gives you a lot of opportunities, because really new guys, new generations, they think differently. They were born with iPad or iPhone or a smartphone, and they're completely different. So go not to the technology, like technological sides, but go for the product. Which product will be needed, why people will like it, or why they will use it. Take into account that there will be shifts, generational shifts very soon, where we can have another blue ocean for fintechs. So that's very general, but okay.
So Sergey, you stole mine. Listen to your customer. So that's off. So let me think of one. So if I would design, and I'm not a software engineer, nor do I have a startup. If I would design any financial product, I would design it for messaging services. That would be my advice. Why? Because customer acquisition costs will be key for your future if you are in a fintech industry. That's the big advantage of the big banks, because they do have that relationship. And if you have access to messaging services and will believe in the platform as delivering mechanism to customers, you're going to be probably at the forefront of your industry.
Excellent. I'm trying to think if I have any advice for a fintech. I don't think I have a particular advice for a fintech, but for any startup, it would be do your homework and then believe in yourself. So that's the best I can come up with. I'd like to thank all of the panelists, and thank you, the audience.